So I'd like to welcome you all to the Lanesville Community Center for an at-large City Council debate 2019. Thank you, candidates, and thank you, audience, for coming. Just a little bit of introduction for the agenda. Our moderator is Judith Olson, and our timekeeper is Farrell Weiner. And we're going to start with some opening statements in response to 3 questions that you've had. They've had those for about 2 weeks, so plenty of time to think through a plan. And then we'll follow with 3 other questions that they've just been provided that came from neighbors. And after that, we'll have time for questions from the audience. So as you think of things they've said and things you'd like to ask, we'll have hopefully at least 20, maybe 25 minutes of questions from the floor. We provided a little bit of time then for Val Gilman to say a few words from the Ward 4 perspective on these issues. I don't see her here yet, but followed by a final question and some closing statements. So I'm going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, please sit. I think it turned out to be a very conversational event the other Thursday, very engaging and substantive that way. So again, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Judith.
I think I mic'd already. Oh, do I need this mic?
No, you don't need that.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Okay, so I'm just going to stand for this opening. As Val said, welcome to the Lanesville Community Center. I'd like to ask if everyone would silence their cell phones if they haven't done so already. That's very helpful during the debate process. And I'd like the candidates to know that we're going to give them, Farrell, as timekeeper, will give you 15-second warning when your time is almost up, and then he'll put up a card for no time left, 0. And if you could close at that point. I'm going to read an introduction. The Lanesville Community Center would like to focus this debate on the specific question of housing and development in Lanesville and the city more generally, as some of you may remember we did several years ago. Prior to that debate, the LCC held a forum to talk about neighborhood issues, and we convened a similar event a year ago. Trends in housing, cost, scale, age, and income of owner or renter emerge over and over, also going back to the 2001 master plan as the major concern to our neighborhood, whose historic strengths and character have relied on a diversity of residents, from young families with children, artists, writers, fishermen, and seniors, and with a modest housing stock that all could afford and that protects historic landscapes, drainage patterns, and views. 2 years ago, many candidates brought up ideas that we have heard repeated in the 2 debates and have been spoken so far this year. We have also discovered that we have asked for inventories of city-owned property, owned land, that we should implement recommendations in the housing production plan, raise taxes for second homeowners, align the cutoff for affordability with the incomes here in Gloucester, and not just Boston. Find out what other cities and towns are doing, and with the public, take a comprehensive look at the zoning ordinance. And yet the scope and pace of implementation of proactive approaches to deal with this crisis are still narrow and slow. It is also fair to say that the problems and the levels of concern among residents have grown in the last 2 years, with Airbnbs proliferating and more pressure on the rental stock, the average price of homes continuing to rise, and more recently a citywide understanding that our boards and are granting variances and special violate the mission and rules of our zoning ordinances, and that are facilitating tear-downs, McMansions, and new homes in our area of our city, which all our city plans suggest are inappropriate for such intensive development. We would therefore like to move beyond just another list of ideas and instead ask each of you to present a comprehensive plan for steps to be taken effectively and expeditiously to address the crisis. Each of you will be given 5 minutes to respond to these 3 questions, and we appreciate you being as specific as possible. So I'll read the 3 questions that they've all been given several weeks ago, and then we'll try and rotate the order tonight. But we'll start here at this end of the table, James. So question number 1, and we've asked them to speak to all 3 of them in 5 minutes opening. What would you propose as a comprehensive housing and development plan, and how would your your proposed measures lead to a rapid increase in the availability of affordable and middle-income workforce and senior housing. Can you provide estimates for the number of new units created and the number of existing units maintained that can be kept affordable? Second question, given the unusually high number of variances and permits being granted that are not in conformance with our zoning ordinance and plans, what would you propose? And the last question, given that you may be elected as an at-large city councilor and would not have the authority to implement directly your comprehensive plan, how would you propose that the city administration, city councilors, volunteer boards, and commissions such as zoning, planning, and conservation, the Gloucester Housing Authority, and implementing Housing Authority, nonprofits, and residents work together in developing and implementing an effective response to the housing and development crisis that is commensurate with the urgency of need? So we'll start with James, 5 minutes.
5 minutes for the 3 questions?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for everyone for attending. My name's James O'Hara. Pertaining to the housing issue that we live with presently and will live with in the future, my heart goes out to those as a existing counselor and a candidate. For 4 years, I've knocked on many doors and heard from many residents pertaining to the problems and the critical issues dealing with fees and taxes. Seniors who live and have lived here for years and are struggling with paying their water and sewer bill, their taxes. And obviously your friends and families, sons, daughters, nephews, and nieces that are growing and looking to stay here or have moved out and are looking to relocate our city. It's a kind of a loaded question. As a city councilor, things don't move that quickly. Nothing moves that quickly. As a matter of fact, the plan 2001, developed in 2001, city's almost 400 years old. We've created rules over time, ordinances that others had, through public hearings, have agreed to, that are on the books. If people want it changed, the lot sizes, the development, where development is going to take place, we need to go through a public hearing and change rules and regulations so that the general public agrees to these things, because this is your city. It's not my city, it's not any of ours, it's our city, and everyone has to agree, or the majority, should I say, has to agree. But with that said, things that we could do is streamline. Obviously, everything costs money. Developers come into the city, or existing developers who live in our city, who are building out. Any of the costs that they have, they're basically going to pass off to the end user. So us as a city streamlining those costs to minimize what those costs are. And there are many costs involved with it, right from the first building permit to the end. They have to have a permit for cutting into the road, for water and sewer tie-ins. So again, as a councilor, we can control those. Those are all fees that require increases or decreases. Small things that everything adds up to existing in our city. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago, we increased the cost of the plastic bags. As a councilor, I fought that because it was a quarter. But again, every penny adds up to living in our city. And talking to seniors, every penny means something. When they say that they're struggling to pay our water and sewer rates, my heart goes out to them. It's easy to as a councilor, to raise things, even if it's a small amount, but that impact has a drastic effect on seniors, how they live. They have to wake up every day struggling how they're going to pay for something. As a matter of fact, as a city councilor last year, the last storm that we had that was proposed to be 3 inches turned out to be 14 inches. And I can tell you, I've gotten more calls from seniors. They sit home, they have obviously they want to do the right thing, but how are they going to pay to remove that snow from their sidewalks? First of all, children today, unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, they don't want to shovel snow. A senior has to go and hire somebody to shovel their snow, more than likely a professional. Professionals have to charge for the labor. Labor is very high today, zero unemployment. The minimum wage, forget about the minimum wage. I'm an employer. I have 10 employees, 6 of them from Gloucester. Minimum wage means nothing. Supply and demand. You pay what you have to for labor. So in turn, that all has to be passed on to seniors who are looking to clear the sidewalks so they don't get a fine from the city of Gloucester. So we accepting all these and trying to minimize those burdens to our seniors. Back to the home, again, that's a cost of existing in our city. So we, as a city councilor, can try to minimize what we increase and potentially look at decreasing fees and fines. Again, it's easy to do as a councilor, but I would look to try to lower those fees and fines. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Hi, my name is Melissa Cox. I have the fortunate ability right now to watch my niece, who has managed to change out my pad of paper and my pen with my notes for tonight. So I'm going to try to remember everything that I had written down. A lot of my responses are also going to cover multiple questions because some of them do have the same response. As far as what I would propose as a comprehensive housing and development plan, we already have that. It's the housing production plan. We're already in the works with doing that. Jen Holmgren is appointed to that committee, and we're working through changing things. There's a lot of ideas that have come out of that, and I hope to see those come forward soon, and I hope to be on the council after January to see some of those really good ideas implemented. So some of the ideas that we can work on is certainly working on more housing for, say, the over 55 group that are looking to downsize, that may have a big house, and put that on the market for some of the families that are looking to live in Gloucester. But in order for them to put that on the market and downsize, we have to have something for them to downsize to. And I don't think we have a lot of that type of housing in Gloucester at this point. And so it's certainly something that we should be looking into. Also, tiny houses. Beverly just had a big show on that a couple weekends ago. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend, but I heard it was packed. So there's a lot of interest in something like that. Boston the state is looking forward to implementing, as of January 1st, the right for the cities to move forward with their own tiny housing plans. So that goes back to what I've been saying all along, is we need a inventory of our current land that's city-owned that's developable. With that, we can partner with Harbor Light Partners, a few other nonprofits that are in Beverly that do this for a living, that are really good at it, and that people we should be partnering with. I want to say it's the CDC, but I can't remember the full name. And CDC, it sounds like Center for Disease Control, but not that one, I promise. Some of the other things that we could do to slow down the housing and really look at things a lot deeper is a demo delay. It was proposed many, many years ago. It was recently, within the last 3 years, proposed in regards to historic housing, and unfortunately that was turned down. So again, we can bring these things up as many times as we want to. It's up to the council to move something forward. I could put up an order for anything and have that conversation. And I think it's important. I don't shy away from putting things forward. The plastic bag ban, when it started, was not a popular idea. It wasn't mine, it was a constituent, and I brought it forward because it's for the discussion. I'm never going to be judge, jury, and executioner on anything. I will bring it forward. If it doesn't pass, I'm not offended. I'm just glad we had the discussion. As far as the second question, given the unusually high number of variances and permits, you know, if you really, really dig into those variances and permits, you're going to see that a lot of what the city is currently is non-conforming lots. These are weird setbacks. The city was built way before the zoning laws were created. A lot of these people are looking at putting fences in, sheds. So a lot of what comes before ZBA is just that. It's minimal. So the 95% approval rating is probably correct, but we really need to dig into more of what those things are. A very small percentage of those are actually the big ones that end up before city council or planning board. Some of the things that I would like to see is a support staff with the city for ZBA. I don't think they're as supported, and I don't think that they have all the knowledge that they need to make smarter decisions for the benefit of the city. And my time's up, so I'm gonna go. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Chris DiMercurio-Sicuranza. This is a very important question. I know there's multiple parts to it, so I'm going to try and do my best to read from my iPad, and I apologize in advance. It's just that I want to make sure I'm hitting the talking points here. So with regard to the affordability and the middle income workforce and senior housing, especially as it relates to the number of new units as a potential idea that we have, it says it in the question itself. That's really driven from the mayor's office, but obviously on the city council side, that's up to us to decide how we can frame it, how we can perhaps talk about streamlining the process. And when I was in the mayor's office, I was lucky enough to work with the IT department and the community development side to help streamline the process, to help everyone being enlightened around what it is to get a permit and how to actually get one either in person and getting the friendly customer service that you deserve as part of that, but also to get some more services online. And then, by the way, that increased revenue for the building department. So a lot of these things that we're talking about here is streamlining and optimization. But with regard to affordable workforce housing, we're talking about attainable workforce housing. And so I think there was a council plan, and I'm willing to bet that Peter Cannavo will pick up on this more than I will. But there was a plan in the past where we talked about accessory in-law dwelling units, where we could potentially have up to, I think it was around 100 units or so ready to go. Now, these are people who are right now perhaps not conforming. Perhaps there's something where they're afraid of talking to the building inspector. Not only would we bring the standards up such that we can make sure that people who are in these units safe, making sure that there's no fire hazards, making sure that there's no problems there, we could bring them online in such a way with that streamlined process that I just talked about, that you have about, I think, about 100 units, I would estimate, that are available right now. So that affects the bottom line. What is this bottom line number that we're talking about, though? If you don't know, it's lumped into a greater Boston market, which also says, by the way, because we're attached to Boston, it means that unless you're making $90,000 a year, the affordability rate is set at that precedent. So when we're talking about affordability, we have to know what we're actually talking about and how we can actually make it just that, attainable. So I would want to work with the mayor's office of making sure we're working with the legislative partners with regard to how can we make sure we're either working with Salem and Beverly and the like to make it a more realistic snapshot of the North Shore Greater Boston region. But more importantly, as it relates to the partners that we were talking about there, Harbor Lights, the North Shore CDC Community Development Compact or Community, I forget, Mickey Northcutt, the Cameron's Project. You're seeing a lot of good stuff happening, but also mixed-use development. RCG is doing residential and commercial mixed-use business spaces. We have the potential to do that downtown, and I want to work with the people that are doing that across the North Shore that are doing it very well, by the way. So I think Main Street has a lot more potential. I think the rest of Gloucester has a lot more potential. And as we're talking about Airbnb, the thing that I keep talking about is who's going to do that? The building inspector's department right now is pretty overwhelmed. Now they have to go to a short-term rental place. As Melissa said, we need to get more support. That could also equal more revenue. That's a really good thing for all of us. So I also think with regards to the variances and the number, The required lot sizes, the setbacks, the density restrictions, it really doesn't reflect the realities of the actual houses in Gloucester. I think it's more so there's a high percentage of houses that are non-conforming. So my mother-in-law's house, there's a little parcel of land that has a slope and a pitch to it. And, you know, it went to the ZBA, I think 3 times, maybe 10, 15 years ago. You know, we have an affordable housing crisis. We can find the variances that are appropriate, but we need people to build. Also, my mother-in-law, she's not here, I usually point her out in the audience. She changed her single-family home to a multifamily home. And she did that within the means that she could. But I think there should be a clearer process on how to do that. I think our seniors especially could benefit from that. We have a lot of beautiful historic homes. If we made them multi-layered, we could get more revenue for our seniors and, by the way, have affecting that bottom line affordability number. And last but not least, talking about the nonprofits, the different groups that are working on this, it's true, the housing production plan is a critical piece of that. That means we need to get feedback from you. That also means, by the way, we have to let you know when we want that feedback. I think for a younger generation, they're working 2-3 jobs. It's hard for them to come out at night. We have to make it more understandable, more accessible, work with partners like 1623, work with partners across the community, like the Lanesville Community Center itself, real estate professionals that can help enlighten us around the different opportunities as it relates to the different types of mixed use. But we could do more to streamline that process. And I think this, by the way, with the boards and commissions, there's people that have been trying to work on the charter. We are almost 400 years old, but we're trying to look at the Charter Commission to see how we can streamline our boards and commissions. We have so many great volunteers. We have so many people that are doing great things in community development. I don't think they have the full support that they need. I think some of these revenue things, and I know we're going to talk about some smart city solutions and parking. I want to talk about revenue and talk about the ways that we can all work together to the best of us. So I think that's it. 0 seconds.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Joe.
Thank you. My name is Joe Salino, and I am running for my 7th term. Hopefully, we'll be successful at that. I spent most of my time at City Hall, either on planning and development and budget and finance. And a lot of what we're talking about here tonight is planning and development. When we received this letter to specification of what tonight is going to be about, I interpreted it more as what's going on with Lanesville. And I see Valerie Nelson looking at me, and I think she wanted a little bit more specifics of what exactly the neighborhood that we're in and how the future is going to be for the neighborhood.
I think our letter said Lanesville and the rest of the city, but go for it.
Well, this is what I got.
Yeah.
I find that in order to institute change, there's a lot of people that are not happy with whatever the zoning is in this area. And my experience in zoning is that 3 things need to happen. First thing is that we have to identify the issues. And that's, you identify the issues by having a roundtable discussion, by having ward meetings. And once we know what the issues are, whether it be lot size, the amount of variances, how big the house is, these seem to be the questions that people have in Lanesville and throughout the city. So that's a concern. Once we identify the issues, we determine now the solutions. And what do we have for solutions when it comes to zoning? Well, we can change zoning. Again, looking at whatever the variances are and all the rest of it. It all depends which way we want to go. Do we want to change zoning to make more housing? Or do we want to change zoning so there'll be less building? That's what has to be decided by the ward, by the roundtable discussion. And I understand there was a roundtable discussion, and I don't know what the results are. I don't know if they've been published. But that then needs to be considered. And the other thing is overlays, particular areas of concern that you don't want to be overbuilt. And we can change that, and basically, it's a legal spot zoning. That's what an overlay is. And but as long as it's for the public good. So that's something to look at. And then the third part is start to implement some of the changes. And that's we as city councilors can do that by going around and seeing what exactly the changes need to be to bring into effect of what the community wants. Like I say, we have to get together and we have to find out what we want. And once you tell us what you want, we can start working on the logistics and the zoning changes to make it happen. Now that can happen in this ward and it can happen in any other ward. We should probably do it around the whole city. So that's my plan for this area. I hear a lot of complaints about question number 2 was the zoning ordinances and the decisions being handed down by the ZBA. ZBA works on the premise of hardship. If you can go in and show a hardship that you can't build your house because you need an extra 2 feet on a variance, that seems to be what they do. But if we feel, or if anybody feels in this room that we're giving too many variances out, then maybe we should probably do an analysis of for a 2-year period, or our zoning board, and see how many variances they've given for height, how many have they done for lot width, lot area, and then compare it to communities that are our size, that are on the water. And it's a volunteer group that does the ZBA, and they work very, very hard. But unless we have something that we can put in our hand and say, listen, I think the variances are just, for some reason, are much higher than they should be in the community. And the last thing is that when it comes to affordable housing, again, like I spoke earlier, we have to decide what we want. If you want to restrict the size of the lots and how many you can do, that's the direction we're going to go in. But if you want to expand it, it's going to be less. Did I say C0? Okay. You don't have enough. I'm going to look like this.
Thank you, Joe. Jen?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jen Holmgren, and I'm running for re-election as a councilor at large. And you may notice I am reading from pieces of paper, and that's because these things are important to me, and I don't want to speak off the cuff. I want to make sure I'm giving you the best information I have on hand. The important things to know about me are that I'm a registered nurse with over 20 years of experience in the health and human services field. I'm a mother, and I'm a highly involved member of our community. And during my last 2 years as your city councilor, I've worked hard to represent your concerns. I've been an affordable housing advocate for a number of years. A little over 2 years ago, I helped bring the housing issue to the forefront by speaking at a city council meeting about it. Because of that, it became a campaign issue in 2017, and I'm glad the momentum has kept up into 2019. When it comes to housing, as Councillor Cox said, I'm proud to say I am the council liaison on the Housing Production Plan Implementation Committee, and I'm in this working group geared toward examining our inclusionary zoning ordinance. This committee is composed of members of our planning department, our community development department, the Affordable Housing Trust, the Planning Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Gloucester Housing Authority, and members of Cape Ann Local Action. And we are taking a comprehensive look at how best to apply our current housing production plan to fit Gloucester's needs. With the city's planning director, Greg Cadamartori, our health department director, Karen Carroll, senior care director, Scott Trenty, Gloucester Housing Authority director, David Holden, and Sunny Robinson, our former public health nurse and community advocate. I am also on an ad hoc committee to review the affordability of assisted living residences here in Gloucester. These are issues that require careful thought and examination, and I am glad to serve on these two committees and to get into deeper discussion about them tonight. So as far as number 1 goes, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. We have a very solid housing production plan. It's on our city website for anybody to go and look at, and it's done by our Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which is our regional planning authority. We've got the recommendations, but we also need community buy-in. We cannot do anything rapidly, and our government doesn't move rapidly to begin with, and this is by design. Unless we involve neighbors and stakeholders, the chances of any effective solutions are slim. I'd like to explore unconventional options. So, for example, and this is speaking very loosely right now, some kind of tax incentive to property owners who can't keep up with maintenance anymore to make unused buildings into affordable units. And I'm specifically referring to the old Annisquam campsite on Stanwood Point in West Gloucester, just as an example. And I think it would be kind of cool if we could turn that into some sort of little mini art colony or something. And I'm also thinking about the Manship residents and the Aubergine tiny house that came and visited Lanesville over the summer. I'd love to make it easier for people to buy tiny houses, and I know that Councilor Gilman has been working on this. And finally, thinking ahead, and I have not talked with anybody about this, so please, this part is off the cuff. Since we're talking about maybe taking Plum Cove School and merging it with Beaman a few years down the line, I think it would be nice if we could turn the Plum Cove School site into elderly housing with a high-capacity septic tank. Again, that's totally off in the weeds, off the cuff, but just a thought. Number two, regarding special council permits anyway, the number that has been approved since 2014 is just eight special council permits. So when we talk about special permits, they hit the papers a lot. We talk about them and we talk about them and we talk about them. And it seems like we do a lot of them, but we really don't. That's 2014, 8 in 5 years. Our Zoning Board of Appeals is constrained by our current ordinances and also by state statute. And variances and permits are given within the scope of existing laws. So the City Council and the ZBA are obligated to hear every point of view, but it must be through the lens of our laws. That's our responsibility. The decisions they and we make have to be within the context of state and local legislation. Regarding local ordinances, every single section of our zoning ordinance has been written after a process that involves the opportunity for input by all residents in the city. And these decisions were never made in a vacuum or with the idea that people can just push things through, no matter how appealing or unappealing a particular project may seem. That's why there have been only 8 special council permits approved. That all said, in the Housing Production Plan Implementation Committee, we are at this very moment examining inclusionary zoning, as I said, and making it easier for people who live here to rent to non-family members, to build accessory dwelling units, and even looking at density. And number 3, I'd like to read some quotes from Plan 2001. This plan was prepared through citizen participation rather than through traditional methods of planning. The plan has many authors who have labored over the issues and choices that confront the city, and even though it is an old plan, its values still apply today. Your being here tells me that this is important to you, and I appreciate it, and I encourage you to continue to participate in forums like this. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I'm just going to give a little bio quickly about myself. My background is in construction and construction management. I'm a local 3 union bricklayer. I was born and raised in Gloucester. I'm married with a 2-year-old son. I'm involved in the city's oldest traditions. I'm a proud board director of a nonprofit called Gloucester Boxing. My ideas are pretty simple: improve infrastructure, increase business growth, and reinvest in our kids, such as schools and other nonprofits. There are many ideas to the housing production plan, and we can move forward with legislation within the council. We can look at city-owned land, but we have to be mindful that it will require extensive infrastructure work and it will be expensive. My proposal to develop comprehensive housing plan would take a series of stages. First, we need to get all the feedback from the community, okay? Especially the neighborhoods that are affected directly. Not only hold meetings at City Hall, but hold neighborhood meetings. They're effective. I've been to one this year. One of the ward councils invited me, and I could see how the community came together, that neighborhood, and they actually got a lot done in just that meeting right there. We need to partner up with the right architects as well as developers. The design needs to fit and meet the city and neighborhood needs. I can't stress the word transparency enough.
If this becomes more of a community effort, then the people will embrace it and celebrate it, and the goals will be met rather than rebelled. What happened on Brittany Road and Foley Road was sad and embarrassing. For those who don't know, I'll stick around after and I'll give you more information on it. Between Fuller School, Cameras, and the YMCA, we are developing approximately 113 affordable housing units. We currently sit at 7.5%, which doesn't meet the 10% that the state calls for with deed restriction. Also within those units, I wanted to propose, I think we should consider veterans and maybe have some type of deed restriction for the veterans. And I know nobody's really talked about them. I think they should have a little piece of the pie as well. As far as rapid increase for development, we need to still develop responsibly. However, we can rapidly look into our current ordinance and begin to expedite those amendments, which were passed by the council 9-0 back in 2017. It has a sunset clause of 3 years. The amendments would allow illegal apartment units, like Chris mentioned earlier, to become legal as long as they can meet the building and fire codes. And that wouldn't strike fear into the homeowners because they don't want to be fined. They're scared to come forward because they might not meet all the codes and they'll be fined, and now they have to come up with all this money to meet all these codes, and it's a difficult task. It's very expensive to do these things, and it's a difficult process. So we need to make it more user-friendly. As far as question number 2, and going forward with that, we can also give developers a tax incentive. This will attract developers. They need to make money, otherwise we'll just be chasing our tails. And cluster housing is kind of a production idea that we could use for affordable housing. These units would be smaller and they would share a smaller lot with a common yard. And that would allow us to help meet those affordable housing units. As far as number 2, look, we need to look back on the projects and see who really is benefiting from it. Not the residents of Gloucester. We need to pump the brakes a little on those condos and McMansions. These permits are getting greased and I don't like it. I'm all for development, but again, this is irresponsible development and there is no accountability. Look at the projects at Magnolia. The residents of Gloucester can't afford these homes, starting at $800,000 and up. You're telling me that young people from Gloucester with families are buying these homes? I don't think so. Instead of building one giant home close to $1 million, we should have them zoned to build 3 to 4 homes for $300,000 to $350,000. That would make more sense. We would get more tax revenue, and they're here year round, and they can register their kids into the school. Lastly, I work in my everyday to day with architects, engineers, supervisors, subcontractors, basically all walks of life. When it comes to common grounds, when it comes to setting our goals, we come to a common ground and we execute on our goal. My skill set allows me to be able to communicate effectively with every trade as well as management. I would be an asset to the council with my background. I'm no stranger when it comes to working with and collaborating with others, so hopefully we can all meet our goals and work as a community collectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm going to try to just go right through the questions. My name's John McCarthy. I'm leaving my family out so I can get to the questions here tonight. Comprehensive housing plan, and there are 3 factors to that in the question, leading to affordable housing. Affordable housing is a housing that is deed restricted to maintain affordability. It isn't what people can afford. It runs off a metro calculation out of Boston. It's an 80% calculation for the metro area. Gloucester currently has 121, what I counted today, in the works. They have Fuller School, they have the YMCA building on Middle, they have Pearl Street, and they have the Action building. That's a lot of units. We're still a long way away from reaching our goal, which would be 10%. One thing I thought, I've heard it brought up before, and then it kind of died and it went away, and I never heard it brought up again, was looking into purchasing the deed restrictions. In other words, going out, and I'll take, for example, the Heights. The Heights has 300 units, 100 condos, 200 rentals. With the Metro calculation, their one-bedroom rent, I think, is around $1,300 or $1,400 a month right now, which still meets the affordable housing. If we used some of the money to go out and just pay them to deed restrict those to affordable housing, we'd be guaranteeing affordable housing going forward. The elderly is going to be a problem. I mean, baby boomers are reaching the age. I talked to the Housing Authority last week. It's a 3.5-year wait for a Gloucester resident to get into a Gloucester Housing Authority property. We want our elders to be able to age in place. I talked to David Holden there. One thing we should advocate for is them moving forward with the 40 units down on the east end, behind the old Armory building. They own the lot. Another thing we need for our elderly is some type of an affordable assisted living unit that we didn't get and we were promised. Workforce housing. We have 200 units going up at Fuller. Some of the ideas that I have, and I've lived it, I've seen it, is to streamline the process of going from single family to two family. That gives a family an opportunity to maybe convert a basement, convert with a small addition, to be able to have your children live with you. Another thing that we should look at for families is, and the elderly, is sponsoring some type of quarterly estate planning venues like at the senior center. I think it would go a long way into people, if they took advantage of this, being able to protect their home from long-term illness and nursing home type care. Question number 2 is the high number of variances granted by the ZBA. And I'll echo what some people have already said, because I used to be at the ZBA a lot. I used to build houses, have a company. Gloucester has a lot of, and I would say 90% of the old houses in Gloucester are non-conforming. So when you go to put on a deck, when you go to put on an addition, your setbacks, everybody knows how congested. It's a 400-year-old city, almost, and a lot of the things don't work for current zoning, and I think they're getting an unfair rap with, I think we need to do a comprehensive study on, if people are that concerned, what we're granting. And I think when they find out, they're going to find out that they're minor for the most part. The third question was how to implement the plan. The first thing is teamwork. I think the city councilors have to work together. They have to work with the administration. And most importantly, they have to work with you. There has to be citywide planning. There has to be citywide neighborhood meetings. And as a city councilor, you have to advocate for this. You don't have, there are some zoning changes city councilors can put forward, but we have to be the advocate for you in trying to get this. And more importantly, most importantly, is using common sense when it comes to building and developing and zoning in the city. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, all of you, for your responses and staying on time. The next period here is that we're going to go through 3 questions, one at a time, and each person will have 90 seconds or a minute and a half to respond to each question. They're a little long, so I'm going to read them. And the first one is related to traffic and congestion. Traffic and congestion have emerged as concerns in Massachusetts. As the Boston Globe reported on August 1st, 2009, several towns have put a halt to new mixed-use development as they attempt to assess the impacts of some of the development that has occurred. Dedham, for example, has recently instituted a 7-month moratorium on mixed-use development, and Saugus a 2-year moratorium. Given that congestion at our own traffic circles in Gloucester can be as bad on off-season weekdays as only on hot summer weekends in the past, what are your thoughts about the opening of the new Y facility, 200 housing units, and retail shops at Fuller's site, and the likely impacts on traffic congestion? Specific question, do you have ideas for how to think about traffic and future development, public transportation alternatives here in Gloucester? Would a moratorium on development make sense? So we'll start with John.
I really think that we'd be jumping the gun on a moratorium on development. I don't think that residential traffic is what's causing this. I think when you look at our rotaries, and that's specifically mentioned in there, it's probably more, you've got two schools getting out from the north. You have Blackburn Industrial Park, which has continued to grow and expand. So I think that is more of what's lending itself to these problems. And they're short-term problems. They last about a half hour in the afternoon when the schools get out. They last a little longer at the Rotary. But I don't think the answer is in a moratorium on development. Gloucester's population has remained steady for about 100 years. It's been 30,000 people. So I don't think that's the answer. I think maybe our community development, our mayor's office could maybe work with some of the businesses and stagger some of the times that we release people, especially with the new marijuana facilities going to be going into Blackburn. That's going to cause more traffic congestion at both rotaries. So, I mean, I think the initial response should be to try to work with the businesses in the industrial park and somehow try to stagger workforce hours as an initial trial period.
McCarthy's right. There's a lot of parts of the day where people coming in and out, and traffic's just going to get congested at that time, and you can't really do nothing about it. What we can try to do is improve our infrastructure the best we can. Make sure we have the best roads, the best sidewalks, the best signage. So, you know, people that are coming from out of town that are not familiar with the area know where they're going, how they're going. Gloucester's familiar with each other. They know, Gloucester residents are familiar with each other. They know the areas. You know, he mentioned about the Blackburn. I don't know if there's any opportunity to expand a road back there to connect maybe to the backside of Rockport, because it seems like a lot of that traffic is residents from Rockport traveling through Gloucester. I don't know. I don't know the landscape over there. It's something I would be open to an idea about. There's a lot of those issues that we tried our very best to do, and you know, like we said, Gloucester's 400 years old. The roads haven't changed much. The houses have gotten a little bigger. Cars have gotten bigger. So we just put our best foot forward and respect each other, you know, when we're in a traffic jam, and just understand we're all trying to get to our families safely at the end of the day, during work hours, during school hours. Just be mindful of each other. It's an island. I mean, what more can I say? You know, look at each other and just respect each other, and that's it. Because I hear a lot of that on Facebook. What are we going to do with the bridge? And if you find the idea, please let me know, because I'll shake your hand. And that's all I can say about that.
Thank you, Peter. Jen?
Well, I know we're in the Boston metro area, as is Dedham, but it doesn't take 2 hours to get between the two rotaries, thank goodness. We're on the outskirts still. I would be interested in looking at a demolition delay for historic homes, but it would need enforcement. And right now, our city departments are full of good, hardworking people who are trying to stay caught up with the work that they're given now. So we need revenue to boost those jobs, and it's very hard for me to rationalize a complete moratorium on development, knowing that development will help increase our tax revenue and hopefully enable us to hire more people for enforcement. Let's see. Regarding the Y development, I supported it. I realized that Fuller School unfortunately couldn't be rehabbed, and we needed to do something with it. There were traffic studies done, and we need to continue to do them. I support public transportation 100%. CADA actually has taken a look at different ways to modify its route so that the Fuller Building and the new Y are accessible to people. It's also more environmentally friendly. It's a pretty complicated question. I would definitely like to give it a little more credence, but those are just some thoughts I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, I think what we need to talk about is smart growth. I think the worst thing a community can do is put a sign up and say, we're closed for business, whether it be 9 months or a year. I think once you stop the momentum of developing, whatever it is, whether it be commercial housing or whatever, or affordable housing, to stop that momentum is not a good plan. Give credit to the city administration and city council. We put in 200 units of housing. And where's the best place to put it? Right next to 128. And it's not really gonna interrupt the core city. They're gonna come in and go out and do a lot of the traveling there, and whether it be the why. In order, every special permit that comes before the city council comes with a traffic study. And don't think that is not, a major part of the permit. How does it affect the traffic, and what we can do to improvement? And certainly, we don't want to ruin a neighborhood because of the traffic that happens. We need to keep the city viable, and in order to do that, we need development. But we need smart development, smart growth, and not something that's going to be detrimental. There's nothing worse than anybody that came before the city council, that some development will go in the neighborhood and your property value is going to go down. Absolutely not. That has to work for everybody, and whether it be traffic or whether it be the property values. And then the other thing is that we can't govern the city just because we have, for 2 months out of the year, we have the visitors coming in and the Cup Bridge going up. That's the way the Gloucester is, and it's not going to change.
Thank you. Chris?
So funnily enough, I believe with regard to Saugus, the 2-year moratorium was put into place because it was related to the new consolidated middle school and high school that they have. So when you're hearing about these sorts of plans, it's because there's usually a domino effect. And even though we're coming up on our 400th, we don't have to act like it. We have a lot of solutions out there with regard to either apps, there's to the smart growth plan. There was an assessment across the different parking lots in downtown and across the city that we can implement a system from a statewide grant that both Salem and Beverly are using, from an MAPC grant, where you can put on a sticker on one of the meters and you can use a traditional coin or you can use an app. Now, what we can do beyond that is not only just to incentivize the small businesses to have success, we can make sure we understand where patterns of traffic are going. I think across the summer, everyone has seen that when there's been a big festival, which is a great thing, by the way, for our local economy, there's the residual effects that you might see across the city. So to that end, though, unfortunately, the Chamber doesn't know what Discover Gloucester is doing, which doesn't know necessarily what the Special Events Advisory is doing. We need to have more communications with regard to what events are going on, when the traffic patterns are going to be bad, and we can implement some smart city solutions. I think most municipal lots, by the way, typically charge when you leave the beach parking, not when you enter. So there's ways to optimize there. But more importantly, the smart city growth is definitely the plan to go with, because you have to look at all the different options from the planning and the community development department. I'm happy to see Jill Cahill's here because she's been working on this heavily. So anything I would do is to support community development with their plans that they already have, but they need the support, and we need to support them and their great ideas.
Thank you. Melissa?
I think the first part of this is, I would say, is don't confuse congestion with housing. It's not, they're not hand in hand. So no, I would not support a moratorium. I think there are solutions that we can work on towards fixing the congestion without closing the city down to development. Rockport, for example, has a large lot near their transfer station, and they have a trolley that takes people downtown because there is very limited parking downtown. So, I mean, we can look at that. During our heavy congestion, our schools are not being used. So why not partner with CADA and use those school lots, not so much for beach parking, but for downtown transfer. Park at the school, take the trolley for $2 and go down and spend time downtown. Or, do a park and ride with Rocky Neck and have different destinations of our wonderful city. The beach could be one of them, but there's only so much sand at high tide, so we got to be careful of who we push to the beaches. We just supported a grant that we partnered with CADA. We wrote a letter of support it's called the last mile. And what that is getting people from the MBTA stations to our employers. Because taxis, CADA, they're not as good as we want them to be, and not as frequent as we need them to be. And then the big one, MBTA. We get them running. There are lots in outskirts of Gloucester or in other neighboring towns that don't even charge for parking. And we charge more. Like, it's crazy. We need to encourage that kind of transportation. Thank you. I'm out of time.
And James?
Thank you. Regarding the traffic congestion in Gloucester that we presently have, we've all been at the Rotary, whether early in the morning or in the afternoon. We have to work with state leaders to assure that we get funding. The traffic is impacting our businesses in our city. We need more businesses. We need to maintain our business stock. The traffic south of Gloucester on 128, most of you probably have sat there on the highway in wall-to-wall traffic. We need to work with our state legislators to assure that we get funding to improve not only the Rotary, which unfortunately we need to improve the foot traffic across a Rotary. Can you still believe that in 2019 people are walking across 128 with a yellow blinking light? We should be ashamed of ourselves. It's sad, but what is it going to take to change that? I don't want to have to say it tonight, but we need to work on improving safety of our existing traffic. The moratorium, things take such a long time, as we've already talked, to move things through the system, that I don't think that's necessary. But we need to be cognizant of our existing traffic. The YMCA 200 units, the traffic engineer said that that will not impact traffic. Well, obviously, we will find out. I'm afraid that it will impact our traffic. So we have to look ahead at working with our state to improve our 128 and rotaries so that people can transit our city safely. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is about climate. Recent reports by the UN and the US government suggest that climate change impacts could be much more severe and much sooner than previously thought. The city's vulnerability assessment does not reflect this new science, and in particular, does not predict the full impacts of a hurricane such as the hurricane of 1938 if the track were closer to Gloucester and west of the city. More importantly, it addresses impacts on municipal infrastructure, but not on private homes and businesses, including the 500 structures that are already in the high-risk FEMA zones as sea level rises. Other Massachusetts coastal communities are facing up to the potential damage from increasingly strong and slow-moving storms and the potential denial of both private and public insurances. Falmouth and Newburyport have started to look at the concept of managed retreat, ending the construction of new homes in high-risk areas where even elevated homes on stilts are unlikely to survive major storms, and providing incentives for homeowners to relocate to higher elevations and lower risk zones. Specifically, what are your thoughts about taking a look at housing development and protection, or perhaps removal, in our high-risk zones? And for this question, we'll start with Joe, and then I'll alternate back and forth.
Me?
Joe, yes.
I was looking out the back of my windows at the store today. I was looking at I-4C2, and that had probably a foot of water that I could see. The tide was just coming over the docks, and I've been in that store now for 26 years, and I see it much more frequently, that law flooding, and the tide just coming over the docks into that. So it's here, it's changed, and we need to gear ourselves up for it. One example I want to give you is that how do we control it? A few years ago, if you remember, somebody wanted to build a house on the back shore on the water side. We tried to stop it two ways. One is I proposed an overlay, and I used that word before. And that, from Grapevine Road all the way to Bass Rocks Road. And nobody in the, you take a special city council permit to build on that property. Another Councilor McGarry had a much more complicated scenario, which didn't take. Mine took. So now it is protected from that point, from anybody building. And what will happen is that they have to go to city council, and no city council will ever give permission for it. So these are the kind of things that we have to do. FEMA has changed the maps. And you know, they have these V zones, which is velocity zones, and red zones. And if you want to build on these zones, especially new housing, if you tear down your old housing, you have to build on stilts. It's very complicated. I don't think Gloucester has grasped it. And just looking at you know, the lawsuit that we lost the other day, we need to look at that. We needed to look at it 2 years ago, but we haven't. How are we going to deal with houses that are going to be on stilts, and how are we going to deal with the heights that go along with it? That needs to be discussed. And how are other communities dealing with it? You know, we're not reinventing the wheel here. And you know, see what they're doing down at the Cape. So I think, you know, hopefully if I get on in January, that's one of the things I want to do, is review and see how we can make that better.
Thank you. Jen, would you go next?
Yes. Well, as a city, it is our responsibility to protect municipal infrastructure, to decrease the burden on taxpayers, and I believe this administration is doing more than has been done in the recent past with regard to that, and I'm grateful for it. As a council and as a community, we have to encourage people who really want to build in velocity and flood zones to take a look and see exactly what they're doing. I have to bless you. I have to, you know, I would be realistic with anybody who wants to move here and do that and say, are you sure you really want to do that? I mean, we have lots and lots of properties on hills that would be really great. And yeah. So I'm not sure basically how amenable people would be to that type of thing. And I don't know how we could control the market in that way, but I'd certainly be happy to talk with Newburyport and Falmouth and see what they're doing. As a city, with the resources that we have on hand, we're doing everything we can. I went to, along with dozens of other people, a municipal vulnerability preparedness seminar about a year and a half ago, and we really are looking at our most vulnerable pieces of infrastructure, such as the high school, and doing everything we can to protect them with the short money we've got. So it's an ongoing process. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Chris.
So it's pretty obvious to everyone that we are in a coastal community and we're seeing the effects of that. And so I remember with Winter Storm Riley when I had to help the community collect all the different survey and reporting information when there was cars that were flooded. As a result of that, I was one of the first people in the city to get a MEMA certification as a public information officer. And to have the coastal resiliency with regard to how we can best affect that, it's about communication. And so when the federal government tells you that you have to put something on stilts, you probably have to listen. But more importantly, you can work with your federal partners, and it's true. Mayor Holliday up in Newburyport, there's mayors of Lynn, McGee, Mayor Kim Driscoll in Salem, and especially Mayor Safathi Romeo-Taken has done a great job of making sure to advocate to Senator Markey and Senator Elizabeth Warren. And I can attest to this behind the scenes when I was in the office, because coastal resiliency isn't just Gloucester, it's everyone together talking about this. And so we have to work with our federal partners especially. And Governor Baker deserves a lot of praise as well on the subject, because stilts and the different zones, as Joe was talking about, that's a more complicated subject. Until people understand what's at hand and to understand what the consequences are, is what we're really talking about is the insurance side. It's not about limiting the opportunity of development per se. If it's appropriate, it's appropriate. You know, I think Karen Tibbetts over in Rocky Neck would tell you a lot more about this as well too. The thing is, we don't want to limit people who have legacy homes, who want to help contribute to the economy, who want to make their homes bigger. It's about being appropriate. You're not wrong about saying, Jen, that people should know what they're getting into. But how are we communicating that? How are we enlightening people? How is the real estate professionals aware of this? I think the city can do more with regard to those workshops, and I think the community development has done a great job with the coastal resiliency and municipal planning around that. We just need more awareness of what we can and can't do I think it's unfortunately an inevitable thing. But praise to the DPW for doing the seawall in Lanesville here across the board. We have a lot of great people that are doing hard-working stuff to keep up with it, but they have a limited budget, so really go to our federal partners. I think it's the key to success.
Thank you. Let's go to Peter.
So I bought a house in a flood zone last year. Okay? And I knew what I was getting myself into. Okay? I did my homework. I called local insurance companies for flood insurance and what they provided, and thankfully I got one I could afford. That being said, the homes in Gloucester are pretty expensive, so I didn't really have much options. I love my home. But what we need to do is we need to educate the residents, educate the people around us, and let them know, buyer beware. You know, if you have the money and you want to spend $1 million+ on a cliff, go for it. To me, it's not going to bother me because clearly you have the money to build a house. And if you're willing to take the risk, we'll work with the zoning board and figure out what needs to happen. But at the end of the day, we need to take the right approach. We need to be cautious. We got to make sure people are safe. We can't just build irresponsibly as well because their lives matter. As much as they don't realize their lives are at risk, they are. And in my background in construction, again, this is my wheelhouse. You know, I would help the council with the project finance of these infrastructure issues. And the sea level is something that we need to really pay attention to. I think it's important that the residents on the waterfront are protected and understand what is coming to them. I see people with garden hoses pumping out of their basements into the street. I mean, these are issues we need to help and work with our community and make sure that that's not how they have to live. Because we're limited on resources and homes in Gloucester, and if you want to live here, these are some of the side effects that you're going to experience. And I think if we can work as a community and make sure that everyone's safe and protected, I think we can accomplish a lot more.
Thank you. Peter, let's go to Melissa.
So when you apply for a special city council permit, as of right now, there is a very specific criteria that we're stuck with. And we're bound by making those decisions within that criteria. I don't know how long it's been in place. I'm thinking about that when we're discussing this. I know that we haven't adopted the FEMA flood maps to reflect in our zoning laws. So I know we're behind the 8 ball on that. So I have to believe that we're behind the 8 ball on this. I think that we need to review our special city council permit to accommodate either pro or con, but actually to have that discussion during a special city council permit on whether or not that this is a viable thing. You know, I don't want to put our police and fire in harm's way by having to do a rescue in an environment that shouldn't have been built on in the first place. Not a big fan of that. I don't like risking human lives so somebody could have a fancy home on the water. And that's kind of, to me, what it's coming down to, because we don't have a lot of land to build on in the city. I'm also not a big fan of telling people what they can and cannot do with their land. If they own it, they should have an avenue to explore building, and that is our special city council permit, for better or for worse. That is our process. It's as much as the zoning law as the height restrictions and everything else. It's a right in our zoning law to go before the city council or planning board or ZBA to ask for relief.
Thank you, Melissa. We'll go back down to John.
It's coming. 2 years ago, we had 6 tides that flooded places that have never been flooded before. I was the police chief. I was working. We were all working basically 24 hours a day. And some of our main concerns were accessing people. As Melissa just said, we can't put police and fire in jeopardy because someone wants to have a house where it shouldn't be. And I think the time's going to come when there are going to be places you can't have houses. Luckily, we don't compare to Newburyport and Falmouth that are in the question because they're talking sand. Luckily, as everybody here in Lanesville knows, Gloucester's granite. I think we have to protect our assets. The city has just put up for a $70,000 grant to study how to protect the sewer plant, because that can't flood. They've raised some of our our area sewer pumps so that they won't be affected. Cost is gonna impact this. I'm looking down the street on the way here, that house that's being built on pilings. I mean, that's gotta be super expensive. So, I mean, I think that sometimes the cost of this type of construction will police itself, and like I say, it's coming, and we need to make plans for it. Thank you. Out of time.
Thank you, John. James?
The answer is yes, we need to curb that, because as has been talking, we know the tides are rising, they're coming faster than anyone ever thought of. More importantly, we have to have a responsible person in the administration, and the administration has been tremendous, but we need to dedicate a person or persons to monitor the tides so that floods such as what happened 2 years ago and took out 73 cars at Gloucester High School doesn't happen again. This is happening all over our city. We have to have emergency services equipped with proper equipment, proper training to be able to evacuate people. Because this, again, I can't stress, it's happening faster than we could ever think of. Maintaining Addison Gilbert Hospital as a full-service hospital. 128, the causeway was impassable. The bridge was out of service. The winds were blowing 60, 70 miles an hour. They're not going to put a chopper up to rescue someone from Cape Ann that's dying. We need to maintain emergency services on our island for survival. Because again, Mother Nature is showing what's happening, and we will not stop it. We also need to look at our assets. Gloucester High School is in a flood zone. Where are we going to put the next Gloucester High School? A barrier wall is not going to stop Mother Nature from inundating Gloucester High School. Thank you.
Thank you all. Last question, and we're done on time. Should we go 90 seconds still, or go to a minute? 90 seconds? Okay. Last question is to do with property tax exemption. City taxes are an additional burden on the middle income and lower income residents who seek to buy a home or find a place to rent, including, as we have said, our young families, artists and fishermen, blue-collar workers and service providers, teachers and seniors. Provincetown has already instituted a residential property tax exemption, both for homeowners who live in their own houses and owners of rental properties with year-round leases and not for short-term rentals. An owner of a $500,000 house can expect to see their taxes drop from about $3,530 a year to $2,168, while second homeowners and investors of Airbnb rentals could pay the higher taxes. Specific question: what are your thoughts about such an approach in Gloucester? And let's start with Melissa.
Thank you. I am Chair of Budget and Finance. This is right up my alley. I was so excited to get this one. Okay. Whenever we cut revenue, we cut services. That's the bottom line. So I want to know, with these other towns that are doing this, how are they increasing the revenue? Second houses are already a luxury tax in the state of Massachusetts. And the contents are already taxed for a personal property tax. So there's already that whammy of a tax for people who own second homes. So, I mean, I don't know how much more we could raise that. As far as the Airbnb properties, we just implemented a 3% fee for anybody that's not doing it in an owner-occupied home, or anybody that's not doing it. You can have an owner-occupied home, but it's also if it's a second property, or if you only have one property that's being rented, you're exempt from that 3%. Time will tell where that 3% is going to land and how much we're going to bring in from that. But again, it's going to cost a lot more to police it than I think the 3% in the revenue that we're going to get. So we have to be very careful about cutting taxes. I am intrigued by this, and I will be reaching out to them to find out how they're cutting revenue and not cutting services. Buyer beware on cutting revenue, please.
Hey, thank you. James.
this taxes are an important issue. We as a city need to minimize our tax. Again, the opening question is how people can afford to live in Gloucester. We need to minimize what we charge people. We may not be able to afford gold, may have to go to silver. We can't continue to, as Mr. Destino said at the Ward 1 meeting a week ago, we compensate our employees very, very well in the city of Gloucester. Well, that is passed on to the taxpayer. You are paying for those salaries. We have to reduce everything in our city to reduce the cost of taxes. We have to increase our business stock. We make money off of businesses. We lose money off of residents. So building more houses costs the city of Gloucester more dollars. So we need to increase our business stock, maintain our business stock. We can't be losing businesses in our city. Gorton's moves their freight in and out. We've talked about traffic. Their cost of doing business is increasing because our traffic is increasing. We are not watching the ball heading south on 128. So we cannot be moving taxes around. We have to lower taxes. We have to stop taxes from increasing, the fees, everything, water and sewer rates, the purple bags, the parking, everything has to be lowered because you are paying for that. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Let's go to Peter.
Kind of go off what O'Hara said. I mean, we do have to consolidate some of, our city workers, but we also have to understand, like our DPW workers, they work very hard, and we need to take care of the people who are working on our infrastructure. I mean, we as a city, DPW does more work than the surrounding cities. So when Manchester needs a fire hydrant, they don't know how to do it. They call us. Same thing with Rockport. If they don't know how to fix a water main, they call us. So we need to make sure that our DPW workers, as union members like myself, are protected and make sure they get paid well for what they do. Because if these jobs get subbed out to private contractors, they charge state rate of $60 an hour. And now you're going to lose, a good employee from Gloucester to jump shifts because we didn't take care of our own. We just got to be mindful where we're making the cuts. I understand things are expensive and we have to work together. Also, with the tax, we need to look at like the surrounding cities like Providence and like Melissa said, touch base with them, seeing how they're supplementing that money. If they're losing it through property tax, how are they supplementing that loss? It's important to work with our surrounding cities, see what they're doing, adopt good ideas, and move forward from there. If it's not broken, don't fix it. So I think that's a good way to go about it.
Thank you. John.
Yeah, I'm a little confused with the math here. 500,000, $3,500 tax bill. I think we're around $13 a thousand. That'd be about 6,500. But just taking your figures here, it looks like it'd be a 33% discount in your tax bill. There's no way. I mean, that's
25%. And it's revenue neutral. It's not like they're losing money on this. They just give a 25% discount to
You're losing
the
money on it.
residential exemption.
so. Where do we make it up? That's what I'm. I
The
work.
second homeowners or investors.
We're talking over $20 million here, and I don't know where we could make that money up. But that being said, we have an obligation to protect the public and we've gone through it down here in Lanesville with the fire department. And Melissa said just the same thing. She was on budget finance. If you take away, you've got to make it up somewhere else. And I just don't know where you can make up those kind of dollars. Those are huge dollars. I'm just rough estimate in my head. We're over $20 million in difference, and I don't think you could charge people at Airbnb. I've heard estimates at Airbnb, the 3% coming in at somewhere around 30,000. So I think we have to run with the Airbnb at 33%, see where we end up after a year or two, and maybe that can supplement some type of program. And I think it's been earmarked to go to the affordable housing trusts. So I really think we got to see where the money comes in on this type of thing. I think it's not doable with the figures that I'm looking in front of me.
Thank you. Jen.
I'd like to explore this question from the perspective of deeded affordable housing and creating affordable housing. So looking at our HUD designated area median income, I'd like to see how we can explore opening that up to 30 to 60% area median income as opposed to the 80%, which is currently kind of our default, if I can use that word. And right now, the Housing Production Plan Implementation Committee is examining how we can work within the HUD guidelines to make it work for the nearly half of Gloucester citizens, residents who fall within the 30 to 60% area median income range. I think it depends on which demographics you're looking at, but it's somewhere around 42 to 45% of Gloucester falls within that particular range. So I am a little bit nervous to see applying this type of thing that they're doing in Provincetown to what we're doing in Gloucester. I'd certainly like to hear if Councillor Cox finds out anything, but I'm inclined to agree with both her and with John McCarthy. If you take away from somewhere, it has to go someplace else, and I'm just not sure if we can do that at this point. So, thank you.
So there's a website, clear.gov. Gloucester participates in it, and it can help show you the demographics and the numbers a little bit more. I don't think it's necessarily true across the board that Gloucester is as well paid staff-wise as we could be, especially with regard to absences within our resources within community development, community waterfront economic development. I think there's actually, when you're hearing about this across from a few different candidates on the table here, is if you cut somewhere, you're going to have cuts in other places too, especially when it comes to your services. So you have to be very careful. But when you're talking about the Airbnb rentals, this is something that's very new still. There's not enough data out there. So that same information that I said you can look as a repository, we don't have that yet. I believe this will be the first year that we have, and we're projecting maybe upwards to $50,000 to $60,000 at most from 1 year's worth, half of that. So you're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. So what you want to talk about instead is how do you add additional services for things like a short-term Airbnb certificate program that can actually raise some revenue, and make sure you have the right program to do that. I think those are the ways that you have to look at the innovation that's out there, because, by the way, if we don't start talking about things like the short-term rentals with Airbnb, you're going to talk about smart growth as well, too. If you don't want those e-scooters that they have in Salem and Beverly now, you're going to have the conversation. And you deserve to have the conversation, by the way. So I don't think it's about making cuts or tightening your belt, per se. I think it's about instead working smarter, not harder. And I think we have the opportunity right in front of us to do that. And by the way, the blue economy. We have so many things we can do on the waterfront that we have not done. I want the community development to have a true waterfront economic developer so that we can talk about things in a more enlightened way without us having to call other communities. That's really the job of the mayor's office, and I want to support them in doing that.
Thank you. And Joe.
The way I see it, I feel the math also doesn't work with this Provincetown. Maybe it's a place where not a lot of people want to live there during the winter, year round. Who knows? But that would be a real hardship on the city budget. But an area that I think that we need to look at, and we keep on talking about affordable housing, and in order to make an apartment affordable, it has to be deed restricted. And a lot of homeowners, a lot of property owners don't really want to have a deed restriction on their house. But how about if we give them a discount on their taxes if they do go for a deed restriction on their house? How about if we work something out that way? That would be much more doable. And that way we can create more housing, affordable housing in the community. Gloucester has a lot of housing, but it's not listed as affordable because it doesn't have that deed restriction. And we seem to get out-of-town developers coming in here, and they're the people that will, in order to build whatever they're gonna build, to do the deed restriction. So that's what we have to work with. And, it takes $110 million to run this city. And we need to get, like Councilor Harris said, more commercial. They're the ones that are gonna be paying a lot of our taxes. I think the best thing we can do is try to stabilize our taxes, and have more income come in from other directions. And we're never gonna solve the affordable housing crisis unless we make it advantageous to the property owner to make their property deed restricted for affordable housing. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at, and it might be a solution to try to close that gap on affordable housing.
Hey, thank you very much. If we could give them a hand for their... Thank you all for your very thoughtful responses. At this time, we'd like to open it up for your questions and just a few guidelines. You're welcome to, this is the time for clarification, to really pick up on one of these great ideas that has been, and to also go deeper into some of your concerns. So we'll ask that you ask a question as opposed to a statement, and that you direct it to one or two or three people at the table, so we'll have room for more questions. And finally, just ask that no side conversations between each other, because everyone is listening really well, and we'll continue that. And Val's going to call on you and pass the mic.
I would like to first say that it's not just Provincetown. Brookline and Boston both give a tax break to full-time owners or properties with rentals. And what they're trying to address is the explosion in high-value luxury housing, and that investors are coming in more and more and transferring rental housing into Airbnbs. So this is a double whammy on our population here as well. These are intended to be revenue neutral. There's no loss in the tax total. It's a discount of 20–25%, which can really help, as you can see in the numbers they have, our permanent full-time homeowning, middle-class workforce, senior housing of all of those that we know. So I encourage you to look at Brookline, Boston, and Newburyport if you're willing, Melissa. So,
Absolutely. I don't like saying no, but in my 8 years on the council, we have never cut taxes without cutting services.
no, but this is a differential tax. And I might also add that our taxes here are causing problems for school overrides and all kinds of things. And if we can find a way to reduce the burden on all those seniors and others who are paycheck to paycheck, and ask some of the newer, more affluent people and investors coming into town to contribute to some of these projects, it might be of double use.
All I would say is that if you guys have a mailing list, like if there's a way to sign up for it now, I will get her an answer. And if you could provide it, I encourage anybody to sign up for a newsletter, because I will find out what they're doing and how they're doing it, and if Gloucester can implement it.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
just that for clarification. Yeah, you're first.
Beach traffic, let's go back to that. I have a question for the new city council. I work at the, volunteer at the Visitor Center from Memorial Day to Columbus Day. I've been doing that will be 8 years next year on Mondays, 4 years on Wednesdays from 12 to 3. Now, weekends, we have the trolley car that comes up there Saturdays and Sundays. And I have a suggestion for the new city council. My suggestion is Monday through Friday. Now, nobody can tell me that the whole Stage 4 Park is tied up with beach traffic. They could designate part of Stage 4 Park for cars, like maybe over by the dog park, for traffic that could be for tourist cars. And get the shuttle, get the trolley, plus a cater bus to come up Monday through Friday, to come up to take tourists and pick up tourists Monday through Friday, starting Memorial Day to Columbus Day, every day.
A chance to answer?
Would one person like
This
to
would
respond? Yes, Chris, go
I'd
ahead.
like to have Joe respond to that,
Oh,
that we
okay.
have the, for the cater bus and the trolley take tourists to downtown Gloucester, back to Stage Ford Park, Monday through Friday, every day, starting Memorial Day to Columbus Day, Monday through Friday, starting Memorial Day to Columbus Day.
Okay, thank
would be
you.
a-
Let's have Joe respond, and then Chris.
There is a trolley that goes around town, but I don't know if it just operates on the weekend.
Well, they should
But,
do it
No, it
starting
doesn't.
Memorial Day to
Yeah.
Columbus Day.
But obviously,
Across the weekends.
we certainly can look at that and maybe start it a little bit earlier and see where the stops are. That's one thing that we've been talking about is try to get the cars off the street and have people park and then have these trolleys. One of the things that we do during, when we have a cruise ship,
Use the school parking lot.
we have a trolley that goes around town and it's cheap money, like $1 or $2. And the cruisers take it and they go to the memorial, they go to the Fisherman's Wives, they go to a different restaurant, and it's good all day long. And so maybe that's something that, that we can implement is a pass. So, you park your car and you can just take this trolley all over the place, whether it be Good Harbor Beach. But I think that's doable and I think Kata would work with us to do it.
Great. Let's take one more response. Chris, you wanted to speak to this?
Yeah, so this is something that I've invested a lot of my research when I was in the mayor's office, as well as now working within the Commonwealth to look at. I'm also on the Discover Gloucester Tourism Board. So this is something we talk about a lot. We want to make sure our volunteers are empowered to help celebrate the best of our community, and Kata is working on it, but the schedule isn't quite as consistent as it could and should be. I also think we should talk to Boston Harbor Cruises again about how we can have better cruise lines across, not just direct to Boston, but across the North Shore. Salem gets very busy in October, but after that, not so much. We should be sharing the shoulder season across the greater Boston region. But, the school parking lots, the Stage 4 parking lots, when I was working with John McCarthy, the mayor's office, when he was the chief of police, we both were on the Special Events Advisory Committee. Again, I can't emphasize that enough. Nobody is centralizing the data with regard to traffic, beach traffic, actual human traffic, in a harmonious way that we can learn intelligently from that. We can literally incentivize via apps like Waze. You might have that GPS on your phone. We could tell people in advance using smart signs and apps that they can go a certain route. And these are free tools. There's no reason why you shouldn't like the word free. And we can work smarter, not harder. I keep saying that. But we can literally incentivize people to go to different parts of the town. And Joe's right. There could be a electronic pass, almost like you have your fast pass, that we could use that for the beaches all the way through to different options for our seniors, for our veterans, and for all sorts of people across the North Shore. And I know for a fact that the different mayors are talking about that. We should support those kinds of smart solutions because they work for everybody.
Thank you. Another question.
Hi, good evening. This question is for Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Cannavo, and/or Chris. I have two questions, and I'll present them, and you can choose which one you want to answer. I've actually been very discouraged and really concerned about. I realize that the focus was about development, but I hear development at all these shiny objects at the expense of me, a middle-class person who's going to be probably priced out of the community. I've heard nothing. This is an island with a shrinking coastline thanks to climate change. What are you going to do about density and keep track of density and have it go out of control? And in addition to all these taxes and this on that and this other thing, I live on a private road. There are over 90 miles of private roads in Gloucester. My community was established in 1960. There's absolutely no water management. I've spent the last 6 months with 35 to 40 of my neighbors getting quotes upwards of $90,000 to $100,000 to try to figure out how we're going to pay for it. We've contacted the DPW for 3 years. They won't even throw a shovel of dirt on our road. There's no people go up our road. So, all well and good for this housing that is based on Boston prices, which you can't get a job here to pay for anyway, so you have to drive 2 hours or 3 hours or commute an hour and a half to pay. You're pricing us out and you're not taking care of us. What are you going to do? Thank you. I live in Magnolia. I live on Hesper Circle. We're connected to Old Salem Path, which is a dead end. And I know that the infrastructure is terrible throughout the city. And there's been nothing to readdress how the traffic patterns have changed in the last 60 years. And I've looked into how we can have our road taken over, and there's a very efficient little line in there that the mayor can just say it's not in the budget. So I'm certainly not going to spend another 4, 5, 6 months of my time because that's such an easy out. But
Your question was to who again? I'm sorry.
Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Cannavo, or Mr. DiMercurio. Either one of those or both of them.
Okay, I'll start. Private roads, this came up at the Magnolia Forum. The formula is such that the city will come in, will assist with the engineering, they'll do the borrowing.
Know all about it. I know all about it. I pay the same taxes as everybody else and I get zero service. We know all about that.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you know about it.
So, but that's what you're speaking to is how Sean Nolan has really tried to talk about the betterment program, but what you haven't felt like is received any sort of return service back to you, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
We pay the same taxes
That's right.
as everybody else.
And Magnolia has the most proportionate of all the private roads. And trust me, I've gone down with Sean Nolan across every private road that I can in the past 2 weeks, especially all over again. What you're talking about is the DPW taking accountability, responsibility, especially if previously they were plowing these roads, especially if previously this was public for a private way. What you're not interested in is the nonsense. What you're interested in is the accountability and the solutions, if I'm guessing, right? Because I'm also I'm a homeowner too. I don't make mega bucks either, okay? I'm the youngest person running here, and part of why I can't start a young family, my family, is because I can't afford to, frankly, ma'am. I can't afford to adopt a kid right now, okay? So it means a lot to me when you ask these kinds of questions about what are we going to do. It starts with respect. It starts with understanding that the constituents are the boss, and it makes sure that you're empowered to know what's going on. When I was in the mayor's office, I heard way too often about people who said, all of a sudden, my road isn't being plowed. All of a sudden, these roads are waiting to be falling apart. I think what you deserve back is respect. I think what we need more of is communications, especially with the DPW, because you shouldn't have to wait around for a solution. You should be actually having those kinds of meetings. I know Councilor Gilman is here. She's a kind of counselor that's going to sit with you and do that. Sean Nolan's one of those people too. And I know for a fact that there's a lot of different solutions that can be worked on, but what I'm hearing is your frustration. And by the way, I would be too. I would be as frustrated as you are. But the betterment program that John McCarthy was just trying to talk about is an incredible thing. But I don't think it's the exclusive burden of you to go and talk to your neighbors about how you can make this work. I think there should be a better way to communicate around that. And there should be, by the way, we have a great bond rating now in the community. We should be dipping into how we can talk about how the community can offer more incentives for you to do that too. And I think there's opportunities to do that.
Can somebody answer about the density question?
So John and I already talked about that. We talked about my mother-in-law. She changed her house from a single family to a 2-family. There's ways to make sure that you're working within the space that you have, especially if you have a house that you're not within your means on. If you're trying to, for a senior, if they're looking at ways that they can make it a double 2-home within one, but also, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
It doesn't seem like there's an upper limit. Nobody's paying attention to an upper limit of the density. You can't just cram stuff in until it won't fit anymore.
Yeah, you're right.
So I haven't heard anybody speak about an upper limit to the density, and that is in the charter.
Yep.
And it specifically talks about population density and quality of life, and they go hand in hand, and they do affect my property.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've actually spent a lot of time talking about Ward 2 and Ward 3 being adversely built on and populated because the outskirt wards don't want to do development. There's been a lot of things that have been turned away from wards 1, 4, and 5, and even some in 3, because it's not the right fit. So we cannot keep building downtown. We've changed the zoning law down there to allow for residents above businesses. But again, we can only go so far and so high. So I know your question wasn't directed for me in particular, but density is a huge concern for me downtown.
How do you calculate it?
you know, I think that
Yeah.
that's where the public input side of
Yeah.
the housing production
I
plan.
don't know, someone mentioned residents have been, what, 30,000 for the past 100 years? I don't think that the population is growing. I think it's where they've been shifted. You know what I mean? And we're trying to accommodate, I would say, everyone's needs as much as possible. I'm not a counselor. I'm just here trying to advocate for the people here, that I'm here to listen to you and what you have to say. And going back to the the street and the private roads, I won't BS you because I don't have an answer right now. But I do know with my background, I can at least try to guide those infrastructure improvements and make sure that you guys do get the best bang for your buck if you go through the betterment program. I know it's not easy. I plowed for the city for many years, and they would give me a route, and they say, don't do this street, don't do that street. And I'm like, why not? And they're like, it's private. And I'm like, but it's Gloucester. They're like, no, we're not supposed to do it. And consciously, I felt guilty, and sometimes I see somebody, and I just hit it. I just did it because I had the time. It's not the DPW's fault. It's not the workers there. They're just told what to do. It's on the upper management. If your boss tells you to go do something, you're going to do it. You're going to abide by them. It's not their fault. They're out there in the cold, and they're trying their best. I don't have the answers right now. Those are questions that we can definitely look better into. That's the only thing I could tell you right now.
The betterment program requires 75% of the owners to approve, and if you can't get it, you're out of luck.
So that goes back to what I was saying. Let's have these neighborhood meetings. You know what I mean? Let's talk to as a neighborhood, not as a city all the time, because not everybody cares, unfortunately, because it's not bothering them. And I think if we really knock on each other's doors and say, hey, let's get together, let's try to fund something, let's try to do something, and maybe we can. I don't know. I'm not making any suggestions crazy, but maybe there could be an additional fund. I don't know. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a councilman, so those are things I'm unaware. Those are things I want to get more educated on. Those are things that I want to be able to help you, myself. Like I said, I live in a flood zone. I live right across the street from the causeway, so it's tough. It's,
My concern is,
I saw so many hands, so.
Thank you for the question.
I'm afraid this is my broken record question. Melissa's heard it 1,000 times, but I don't think everyone else has. And that is about the Airbnb new law. Where is the 6% going that precedes the 3% that everyone's talking about? And the second part of my question is, are you willing to talk about putting a cap on Airbnbs? And I would like to direct that to anybody who can answer it, except not Melissa. Oh, all right, let Melissa answer it. Okay.
Kim, go ahead.
I'd like to answer the part about the cap. I would. I think that Airbnbs are taking away from our affordable housing stock. And
Stressing our services.
stressing our services. Currently, our health department has to count by hand the number of Airbnbs that are in the city on the Airbnb site. Now that doesn't even include the ones on VRBO, and that doesn't include the ones that are being rented out by word of mouth or on Craigslist. It's a huge burden, and these units could theoretically be rented to people who need them. So yes, I would love to see more regulation on that front, especially because sometimes Airbnbs are being run in neighborhoods that have no business having them.
And the 6%, does anyone want to speak to that? Go ahead, James.
The 6% issue I can't address, but the Airbnb, as was just mentioned, it is a business. So these businesses are populating in areas where they're not business zoned. They've affected parking in tightly dense areas, just the quality of life. So this is something that you need representation. The people of Gloucester need representation. It's a business. It needs to be treated like a business. It needs to be zoned, approved, and then ultimately, if it is approved, the taxes need to be implemented. Because the business owners of hotels, motels in Gloucester are suffering. It's similar to Lyft and Uber that are affecting the taxis. They're businesses. If we're going to establish a tax, the tax should be spread across everyone, so everyone is faced with the same burden.
To add on to my response, just one more thing. People who rent out Airbnbs are responsible for having their places inspected, and some people don't know that. They just say, oh, we have this really nice little room here. I'm just going to rent it out. And they don't realize that they have to go through the city for an inspection, and they have to go through to make sure it's certified to be rented. So I wanted to add on to that as well. There's a lot of ignorance around it because people need to make money, and I feel for them, I do, but they need to really pay attention to the regulations.
Next question.
Can I answer her? At the 6% goes to the general fund. It goes to the bottom line. I know that there was discussion when it was raised that more of that 6% was going to go to
The Affordable Housing Trust.
affordable housing or it'd be directed elsewhere, and that never happened. So the 6% tax is it goes directly to the general fund. The 3% fee that we're assessing on Airbnbs is it can only be used for affordable housing or infrastructure. Those are the only two ways that money can be used. And like Jen said, these need to be inspected. So even if you are a owner-occupied house or whatever, you still have to go to the Board of Health and inspect those houses. So because this is so new, we will be monitoring the websites. And again, this is a burden on our already overstressed staff, but we will be monitoring those rental units on those websites. I would support a cap. I absolutely would. But how do you do that with a private business and then they go underground and then you put people's safety? So, it's double-edged sword.
Okay, next question.
I think your statement about and then they go underground is very interesting. That Airbnb, we keep talking about as if it's a bunch of people. It's actually corporation, like Uber, as you mentioned, a corporation that does not engage in any of the other social contracts that our other corporations do. Our hotels, our restaurants and such, are very important relationships with the community that Airbnb does not have, and Uber does not have, and those other new corporate entities that by step or the ordinary commercial contracts and social agreements have. It's a lot more insidious than you said.
The thing is, so I helped host a short-term rental workshop alongside Atlantic Vacation Homes. And so this is a local company that's been around for decades, right? And they do the short-term rentals. And of course, when they hear about this new potential local fee, it's more of a tax. It's just that when you see the breakdown, just kind of how you see like on your hotel tax, you'll see that, oh, by the way, the local tax, this and that. It's being passed on to the local person. It's being passed on to the end consumer. But here's the other insidious part to the nature of your point here, is that the people who think they're setting this up, even if they're doing it for the right reasons, maybe they're making some extra money, they are also told that they have a liability coverage from Airbnb. Let me be clear. According to especially Meredith Fine, who helped co-host this workshop, there is no such thing as a carte blanche or sweeping liability coverage. If you screw up something in that home, you're going to be personally liable to that. But to the integrity of the community, the neighborhoods, the wards, these are places where, what if your neighbor is elderly? They don't want to be hearing about the frat kids that are coming in to have an Elvis
Fiesta
beach
weekend.
party. So we have to really hold them accountable. I think that's where the caps come in. I think the communities, again, I point to Salem a lot because they're the next closest, but Newburyport has also taken a look at this. I think it's something we should look at as the caps. But more importantly, you have to be careful on the black market side, the gray market as it were, because you're going to incentivize people to use other methods that they can get out there. Craigslist is still around. People are still using that. So I think we should be working with these partners. They had a chance to talk to us. They often come around through the MMA and municipal government sites. I think as opposed to demonizing them or beloving them, we should be talking to them and finding out the best practices. And by the way, not necessarily telling people that they need to be going from one path or the other. Invest in the people that you know, especially the Atlantic Vacation Homes and the local businesses that you know and trust. We've talked about it before, but leveling the playing field with the meals and the hotels taxes. We want to make sure everyone has a fair chance. And we also want to make sure that we have a fair neighborhood that we can all be a part of as a true community.
We're getting close to the end, and so I know there's lots more responses and probably more questions, but we wanted to give our councilwoman for Ward 4, Val, a chance to respond. About 2 minutes, Val. Anything you'd like to say?
Have you ever seen me? So,
2 to 3 minutes
holy
responses.
Thank you. What's there, a Patriots game on or something tonight, Melissa? So, anyway, interesting conversation. I have a couple of things that are hot, having heard this. One of them is the whole housing production plan. One of the things that I think would be really neat is as soon as it's finalized, that I could come back here to my ward, my constituents, and have a roundtable conversation about what it means and what you like about it and what some of your concerns are. Because the only way that that production housing plan works is for us to see it work for what we feel we need. And in Lanesville, it might be tiny houses. We've talked about that before, passionate about that. But I think that that's one thing that we need to do, is when we do these great developments at the city, we need to bring them back to all of you. I love coming here and sitting with a flip chart. I was here with Val Nelson's zoning meeting about a year ago, and we broke up into groups and we had fascinating conversations, and I was eager to get the minutes and the notes and see what it was we might be able to look at in terms of Lanesville Ward 4 priorities. So I think that that's near and dear to me, and I won't take any more time because I know everyone is eager to leave. But it's all about process, reach out, feedback, whether it be about the municipal vulnerability plan, the city's priorities. We've got a wonderful plan out there. It's only as good as we're able to get it out to all of you, chat, talk about it, give us feedback, and then we can amend and bring things back. And that's what ward councilors do, and that's what I love to do. Doug comes every Friday morning almost at the Cove Cafe from 7:30 to 8:30. We do a lot of brainstorming, but that's an opportunity where you can come see me if there's not a big meeting. So thank you all for being so supportive and for all of this great group. These are going to be my colleagues. So I'm very appreciative that you're here listening to them all, and make sure you vote on November 5th. I'm first and the only one on the list for a ward councilor, so I would very much appreciate your vote. But thank you.
Thank you, Val.
So thank you, Val. And thank you, Val, for always being here when we have an event in Lanesville. So to close, we'd like to give each candidate 1 minute or less to respond to anything they've heard from another candidate that you'd like to work on with them. What did you hear tonight that you're excited about? Or another closing statement of your choice, but less than 1 minute, if you could. Let's start at the end with John.
Airbnb seemed to be a hot topic. I've heard people talk about limiting. I agree, they're a business in your neighborhood, an unregulated business. That would be something I would be more than willing to work on. I really think that they should have a business license, and 15 seconds already, wow. They're taking business from our local hotels. They're unregulated, and I really think that that's something that is coming that we need to work on. First on the ballot, November 5th. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you, Peter.
Number 4 on the ballot. I think the waterfront is really important to us. We live on an island. I think we really need to focus on our infrastructure, reinvest in our kids. That's the future of tomorrow. Business growth, bringing manufacturing business in here. That way we can lighten the burden of the taxpayers here, let them $1 million companies, kind of help us out a little bit. And I think, again, back to the waterfront, let's optimize on that property. Let's work with the zoning board and try to make some positive moves. And hopefully we can come across the table together and do some good things here.
Great, thank you, Jen.
Thanks a lot. I'm Jen Holmgren, number 7 on the ballot, but hopefully number 1 in your hearts. I also want to say I was remiss in not mentioning Jen Beloff of Action. She is also on our ad hoc assisted living committee. So thanks, Jen. Kudos to you. And I would love to work on implementing our housing production plan with any of these candidates, with any of the city councilors. It's absolutely crucial that people who were born here and grew up here can stay here, and that is for life, hopefully. That is very important to me as a fourth-generation Gloucester resident. My ancestral family homestead is right at 1133 Washington Street. I am invested in this community. My husband and I send our fourth grader to West Parish Elementary School, and I hope to have earned your vote. Thank you.
I am Joe Cellino, and I am number 6 on the ballot. And Jen has taken up number 1 in your heart, and I will take up number 2 in your heart. I think tonight was a nice dialogue. I've heard a lot, and I understand a lot of your concerns. And the role of a councilor at large is to support your ward councilor. They're there defending you, and if there's a dollar to be spent in the city, your ward councilor is trying to get that dollar to be spent in your ward. And we're the ones that kind of tip the scales to make it happen. I have years of experience, I have ability, I have a vision, and I've been wrestling for 2 years, and I am ready to go again. So I ask for your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
I'm Chris DiMercurio-Sicuranza, number 3 on the ballot. And I just want to say thank you to Val Nelson, thank you to Councilor Val Gilman. I had the pleasure a couple of years ago to be a constable in this very hall for the local elections. And I can tell that Lanesville is definitely a very committed place. But that's true across all of Gloucester. I'm so proud of each and every one of us up here, because this isn't Washington, D.C., this is Gloucester. And you can talk to each and every one of us. And I think what's remarkable about what we're trying to do here is represent you. And it's an honor and a privilege. And we might not always agree, but I think it's great that we have these kinds of forums. And that's a testament to the community leaders that make that all happen. And so it's not always easy to do, but a community can make it happen together. And I'm very proud to be running here. And I ask for your vote.
Melissa Cox, I have been a city councilor for 8 consecutive years, and I enjoy all of it. It's been a great privilege for me. One of the things that my slogan when I was Ward 2 city councilor was "Together we can do more." And tonight that actually happened, because through this third question, I actually learned something that another community is doing. One of the key takeaways here for everybody is communicate, communicate, communicate. We have to know what you know, and vice versa. So I promise to get back to you with answers on this, because I'm completely intrigued on how they're doing this. So I promise to respond to Val, and she will get it back out to you guys.
What number are you on the ballot?
Oh, I'm number 2.
Thank you.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, my name's James O'Hara. I've been representing you as a at-large council for 2 terms of 4 years. But more importantly, I represented the city many years ago. If you remember when Bayview fire stations and all the fire stations were closed, I fought along with one of your natives of Lanesville to open those stations. Emergency services are so important, and as a citizen, I took the stand to fight for you. And I ask for your vote because you deserve representation at City Hall. There are a lot of serious issues in the city. You deserve to have someone who's going to stand up for you. I think I've proven myself to the city and to you, and hopefully I can earn your vote on November 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, good job as always, buddy.